Well, hello, welcome, and warm greetings. I am Reverend Eugene Cho, President at Bread for the World, and it is truly my pleasure to be your host for today's important event. First, let's take care of a first housekeeping items. If you wouldn't mind, please introduce yourself in the chat function. I know that we have guests here from all places around the world, and we would love to hear from you. Tell us your name, maybe the organization that you represent, and the place around the world from which you're joining from. As we go through the lineup today, I hope you'll also take some time to comment there and raise questions. If there are things that you want to amplify that someone has shared, please go ahead and place it in the chat function. And again, if there are questions that you have, if you can answer each other, that will be great because we know there is power in collective wisdom. We'll also try to answer as many questions as we can in the post-event follow-up email. Now, before we get started, I would also like to thank our hosts, Bread for the World, 1,000 Days, Results, and Results UK, Helen Keller International, CARE, FHI Solutions, Harvest Plus, Action Against Hunger, Alliance to End Hunger, and Food for the Hungry are thrilled to co-host this event. Thank you so much for these organizations. We believe that we are stronger together. Many of these organizations are part here in the United States, part of a US CEO Council for Nutrition, a new coalition that we hope will advance global nutrition in many ways in the future. Today's event is entitled The Role of Parliamentarians in Advancing Global Nutrition Targets. Straightforward, because we need straightforward conversations and solutions. In my home country, here in the United States, our organizations have worked together to engage US members of Congress on maternal and child nutrition. Now, over time, our Congress has steadily increased nutrition funding and is now considering new bipartisan legislation called the Global Malnutrition Prevention and Treatment Act of 2021. This bill would bring greater strategic vision, coordination, effectiveness, and accountability to our existing global nutrition efforts. Now, while we are urging Congress to do more, especially from a financing perspective, we have been inspired by the leadership and commitment that US members of Congress have shown on global nutrition. Now, in today's event, we wanted to take that idea worldwide and explore the role that legislators and parliamentarians in all countries play in elevating nutrition, and to showcase the momentum that parliamentarians have built and supported within their governments and countries, because we truly need all hands on deck. Today's speakers include honorable representatives from legislatures and parliaments around the world. They have, let's be very honest, a growing challenge before them. Ending hunger around the world is not just about having enough food. It's also about providing the right nutrients. Before COVID, malnutrition provided or contributed to 3.1 million child deaths per year. Now, for many of us, we have heard and we're aware of these statistics, but let me just say that one more time so that it sinks in. Before COVID, malnutrition contributed to 3.1 million child deaths per year. And since the pandemic began, millions more are at risk. Friends, colleagues, it doesn't have to be this way. Research has identified cost-effective ways to address nutrition and the benefits far outweigh the cost. All we need is the political will. All we need is the human will, working to build up the political will so that we can scale up these proven nutrition interventions and address the underlying causes of malnutrition. Parliamentarians are uniquely situated to make the necessary changes to get their countries and the world on track to addressing hunger and malnutrition. Our program will begin with one of today's most pressing challenges: how COVID-19 has disrupted access to nutrition for mothers and children.
If what we know scares us, then we should be terrified by what we don't know. Because beyond the masks, the headlines, even a vaccine, the long-term threats of this pandemic lurk. The coronavirus pandemic has ravaged the globe and disrupted food supplies, restricted, and in many cases shut down, access to nutritious meals and health services for millions of children and pregnant or breastfeeding women, leaving them waiting in long lines, wondering if there will be enough food when they get to the front. Even without the lurking threats of a global pandemic, malnutrition kills more children than AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis combined. And because of the pandemic, the number of hungry people in the world is expected to double. To make matters worse, hunger and malnutrition increases the risk for contracting and spreading diseases and illnesses like COVID-19 and decreases odds of survival. It doesn't have to be this way. While we may not have the answers to cure every illness yet, we can do something about malnutrition today. When we invest in nutrition, we can build resilient communities where children's brains and bodies can grow to their full potential and fuel empowered women and girls who right now often eat last and least. We can nurture the next generation with proven, cost-effective investments in basic nutrition, health services, and food security. All children deserve a healthy start to life. Well-nourished children maintain and grow the ripple effect of recovery and prosperity. When we invest in nutrition, we can build resiliency, reduce disparities, and create conditions to ensure today's children are nourished in ways that secures their health today, tomorrow, and into the future. We can prevent suffering, lifelong disability, and deaths due to malnourishment. We can. But we need your help. What will you do to help?
It's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Martin Chungong, Secretary General of the Inter-Parliamentary Union. Mr. Chungong has become a leader in his field through his work on developing programs to help parliaments become more transparent, accountable, representative, and effective democratic institutions.
Honorable members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to address you during this important event on the role of parliamentarians in advancing nutrition. This is a topic that is very close to my heart. As the Secretary General of the Inter-Parliamentary Union, the global organization of national parliaments, and a member of the Sun Movement Lead Group, I can testify to how the 46,000 parliamentarians worldwide can swing the balance for better nutrition. Over several years, I've had the pleasure of mobilizing parliaments to prioritize nutrition in national agendas and convene multi-stakeholder consultations at the country level. These efforts have, for example, led the Parliament of Zambia to empower parliamentarians to monitor implementation of nutrition legislation. They have further enabled the Sun Movement and its partners to access parliaments to work on issues of legislation and financing of nutrition initiatives. But if we are here today, it is because what we have done so far is not enough. The Nutrition for Growth Summit is a clear message that we need to step up commitment and action. All countries in the world and 1 in 3 people globally are affected by one or more forms of malnutrition. This is a major obstacle to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, and most importantly, it is preventing too many people from living a full and healthy life and from contributing to their communities and societies. Parliamentarians gathered at the recent COP26 meeting in Glasgow also highlighted that climate change poses a significant threat to global food security, while at the same time agriculture is one of the main drivers of biodiversity loss and climate change. Such food insecurity makes it impossible to improve nutrition and eradicate poverty. The global response to climate change will therefore determine how we feed future generations. The COVID-19 pandemic has shown the fragility of our health systems. It has exposed the weaknesses of our food systems and is threatening our economies. In this context, it is difficult to know what is more pressing. How can we boost economies, build resilient health systems, address climate change, and tackle widening inequalities within our limited resources? The truth is that what we are facing is a yawning gap in governance, and it is precisely at the interface of governance and key issues such as nutrition that parliaments play such an important role. Let me use this opportunity to call for parliamentary leadership to reverse malnutrition patterns. Leadership means, first of all, looking inwards to leverage parliamentary powers. Parliaments can take stock of existing laws related to food systems and nutrition and advocate for a national nutrition plan. A comprehensive legal framework requires action across sectors, including health, education, gender, and agriculture. Parliaments also have a responsibility in ensuring that domestic resources are supporting nutrition priorities and are located where there is greatest need. Looking inwards also means finding local pathways and solutions to malnutrition. Leadership also means looking outwards. At the national level, collaboration should be strengthened with all relevant stakeholders. The Sun Movement is showing how multi-stakeholder platforms can foster dialogue and set national priorities. As leaders in their communities, parliamentarians can also champion the right to safe, nutritious, and affordable food for all. Looking outwards should go beyond national boundaries to exchange and learn from one another what others are doing. This event offers a privileged space to build a shared understanding of nutrition challenges and join forces to identify effective strategies. Finally, leadership is about looking ahead. Our vision is one where we can achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, in which we can win the fight against hunger, while at the same time addressing overconsumption, overweight, and unhealthy diets. This vision should not only help us set ambitious targets, but also guide us in taking concrete steps to monitor progress and take redressive action where needed. The IPU and I personally remain strongly committed to continue working with the Sun Movement and other partners to empower parliaments to wield their constitutional powers effectively, strengthen multi-stakeholder action, and together realize the promise of the Sustainable Development Goals. I wish to call on parliamentarians worldwide to take the leadership. This is the only way to turn the tide for nutrition and for the well-being and prosperity of current and future generations.
Thank you, Mr. Chungong, for those heartening and courageous remarks about the role and power that parliamentarians have and the interface of governance and nutrition in showing leadership in their countries and around the world. Such important words. Now, to put that into context, guidance into context, let me introduce our first fireside chat focused on Nepal. Professor Uma Korola is a professor and researcher at Tribhuvan University in Kathmandu, Nepal. Her studies include health, nutrition, food security, and gender. The Honorable Dr. Bimala Rai Padjal is a member of the National Assembly of Federal Parliament of Nepal. She holds degrees in development studies, economics, and management of rural development and agricultural economics.
Congratulations, Dr. Rai, that you are chosen as a global champion for malnutrition. I just want to ask you, with my credit, that what the first thing that really inspired you to become a champion on global malnutrition?
Thank you so much, Professor Umar. Thank you for organizing this important talk as well. I am not a global champion on nutrition, honestly. I'm concerned about malnutrition that my country is facing. I'm concerned about the people who are suffering from malnutrition, and then I'm worried. For Nepal is, Nepal is very, very rich in terms of, ecological diversity and human diversity. We are very rich in biodiversity. We are very rich in, very traditional food and people with different caste ethnic group. And all caste and ethnic group that my country has, they have very different food varieties to eat. All food varieties that we eat are very rich in terms of nutrition, and food is also identity for many people in Nepal. They are also connected to religious events and all the rituals, all the cultural and traditional rituals that we have. So food is a very integral part of our tradition. It's an integral part of our human being as well. But when I see that there are still many children that are malnourished, there are people who do not have access to adequate amount of food. There are people who have access to adequate amount of food, but people lack the nutrition amount that they need. And then there are also people who are overweight and who are suffering from overeating. That is also a form of unhealthy life. So all these things make me worried and concerned that food is basic human rights. Food is fundamental rights is envisioned in my constitution, in our country's constitution. We do have adequate, legislations that guarantees access to nutrition and access to food, but still there are people who are suffering from lack of access to food and lack of access to adequate amount of nutrition. That makes me obliged and that makes me accountable to work on this issue. And that's why I'm here.
Thank you, Dr. Rai. Having saying that, and you portrayed a very nice picture, richness of our culture. But at the meantime, how do parliamentarians in Nepal set policies, priorities, and funding level for nutrition, especially to tackle the malnutrition?
Well, Constitution is our guiding document based on which we make laws. Member of parliaments all over the world, I guess, have similar responsibilities of making laws and setting up legislative environment, responsibilities of representing people who are disadvantaged, and representing people's voice in the parliament, especially during the lawmaking as well as during the oversight, and supervising government's plans and budgets, and oversighting the government's actions in the field. So while doing these things, Constitution gives us an area where to focus. Constitution gives us a guidance, and food sovereignty, food security is outlined is one of the fundamental right in our Constitution. So based on that, Member of Parliaments and drafted several laws to translate fundamental rights into sectoral laws, and access to food and access to nutrition, food sovereignty laws and access to land. These are some of the important laws that we made and that we passed just 2 years ago to translate these food rights into practice. So this is basically we are doing. And another thing we are doing is we are supervising government's plans and budgets. We are constantly hammering government, asking what specific plans are there to address the nutrition. What are the specific budgets and human resources allocated? What are the institutional? Look, our country has just gone to federal structure. We do have federal government, province government, and local government. We do need institutional mechanisms at all these three levels to ensure that we have nutrition strategy, we have nutrition related plans, and adequate amount of budget is allocated at all three levels.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rai. You covered all the very important and prominent issues around the nutrition environment in Nepal. In the meantime, Dr. Rai, do you feel urgent need of a sole authorized institution in Nepal who is responsible to see nutrition matter to translate those promises and commitments in a community level, though we have seen that in our 3 layers of government, nutrition institutions are a little bit weaker to translate all these commitments?
Well, I think we do have institutions at the government level. What I know is, we have a multi-sectoral nutrition plan of the government. We have a nutrition strategy developed by the government, and National Planning Commission is government's, solely authorized and very at the high level operating organizations that coordinates, that makes policies and that coordinates with the ministry. Nutrition is not a one sectoral issue. It requires intervention from many different areas. Ministry of Health is involved, Ministry of Urban Development is involved, Ministry of Sanitation is, Water and Sanitation is involved, Ministry of Agriculture is involved for the food production. So it's a multi-sectoral issue that requires intervention from many different, many different sectoral interventions are needed to address issue of malnutrition.
Lastly, I want to ask Dr. Rai to have a concluding remarks around your commitments to ending malnutrition and your encouragement to parliamentarians to set up and play their key roles in this endeavor.
see, there are two aspects that I'm really concerned, because I know the access to food is important to ensure nutritional security, and government is trying hard, doing hard to reach to this goal of achieving zero hunger. So I'm not much commenting on that, but there are two aspects that I'm concerned with. One is related to changing food behavior of our society. Slowly, because of the globalization, because of the so-called medias, and because of the access to this information technologies and exposure to the world, Nepali society is slowly moving from homemade food, traditional food, the rich food, to packaged food. Being imported from the global market. They are expensive, as well as we are not sure whether they are nutritious, whether they are food, they are hygienic, and whether they have adequate level of nutrition. So in the one hand, we do have people who do not have access to food. So availability and access to food is one aspect, but another aspect is this changing food behavior. And there are aggressive advertisements are there that encourage people to look for packaged food, and we call patru food here, junk food. This junk food behavior is I don't know how to discourage it, but I feel it is important that we discourage this junk food behavior, and then promote our own food, which are very healthy, very nutritious. And here, I think MPs need to play a role of a role model. MPs need to be championed to promote our own local foods, which are nutritious, which are very good. Because if we have roasted maize, they are much more better than having cornflakes, for example. But we are moving to this, we are shifting our priorities and behavior. Making rice is much more nutritious and hygienic than eating noodles, the packed noodles, So I think there we need to work a lot, and I'm very much concerned, as well as very much actively promoting homemade foods. But I'm also, insisting schools and parents actually to help children to eat local foods and the homemade foods, and rather than eating this packaged food, because they are not good in terms of nutrition. Another thing I'm concerned is about inequality that we have in our country. Inequality, conflicts, natural disasters, climate change, food wastage, and lack of social protection. These are some of the issues that make people more vulnerable to food and nutrition insecurity, especially women and children, especially the elderly people living in very marginal land, poor people, as well as people with disabilities. They are usually excluded from access to food. We do have specialized programs, and we have Food for Work, we have safer motherhood programs that are focusing nutrition on pregnant and lactating mothers. We do have food for education programs that are supporting children with good food in the school. There are specific programs aimed to improve the nutrition status of women, children, but still many women are still suffering from lack of adequate amount of nutrition. So this is where I need to really work on. As an MP, it's my responsibility and I'm accountable to that. So my focus will remain to ensure that we have appropriate good legislative environment. We have sufficient budgets and sufficient plans planned to address the nutrition issues. We also have supervisory role to ensure that there are robust institutions at all three levels that implement food and nutrition related program, as well as we MPs need to be acting as a role model to encourage people to be more more responsible while selecting what to eat, how to eat, and when to eat. So these are my priorities in the future.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Rai, for your commitment and voiceful thoughts. And we hope you parliamentarian definitely work prioritizing nutrition to reduce malnutrition from Nepal and from the global itself. Thank you so much.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Drs. Corolla and Pajo. I couldn't agree more about the importance of changing the food behavior of our society, whether in Nepal or in our respective countries. Food is integral to all our cultures as well as our physical well-being. At Bread for the World, we believe that the right nutrition is related to the inherent dignity God longs for each of us to have. The world knows what works to improve maternal and child nutrition. We just need to change our societal relationship to food and mobilize the human will to build the political will to invest in it.
"1,000 days from today, Rashna will pick a wildflower for her mother from the side of a hill as they continue along their path toward a bright, waiting future. And though they will encounter overwhelming darkness as they make their way along this path, it can't extinguish the light of hope and perseverance within them, especially when reinforced by 4 powerful interventions, proven tools that will help Rashna and her mother fight off the darkness of malnutrition, which will kill 3 million children this year and leave millions more facing lifelong illness and impaired cognitive development. But we can change those grim statistics. We can help save millions of lives. Here's what partnering with families like Rashna and her mother, their community, and their country around the Power 4 interventions looks like. Prenatal vitamins will provide vital nutrients for her mother and for Rashna, who will enter the world strong and healthy, a beam of promise and possibility. Support and encouragement for Rashna's mother as she works to nourish Rashna with breast milk, her best defense against infection, disease, and malnutrition. Rashna will thrive, though darkness will loom, but Rashna will triumph. 2 high doses of vitamin A every year will protect Rashna from blindness and fatal illnesses. Rashna will grow and learn and dream. And even as a drought destroys critical food sources in their country, dimming Rashna's light as she becomes dangerously thin. The darkness will not win, because life-saving therapeutic food will illuminate their path. Rashna will recover to a healthy weight and she won't look back. Imagine a world where the darkness of malnutrition is extinguished, driven out for good, by millions of beams of promise and possibility. Strong, healthy children continuing along the path toward a bright, waiting future. With an investment in nutrition, we can help make that happen. And we can start today.
I'm delighted to introduce our next fireside chat, featuring voices from the United Kingdom. Lucy Drescher is head of parliamentary advocacy at Results UK, where she leads work to cultivate champions in Parliament on key issues such as nutrition. Ray Collins, Baron Collins of Highbury, is member of the House of Lords of the United Kingdom and co-chair of the UK All-Party Parliamentary Group on Nutrition for Growth.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Ray, Lord Collins, for taking the time to have a chat. It's really, really lovely to see you again. I suppose just to start off, what inspired you as a member of the House of Lords to become interested in nutrition?
I suppose it originally started as my role as a shadow minister for international development. And I was obviously looking at policies that were effective in terms of delivering on the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN. And I began to sort of realize that actually the 2013 summit that the UK led on had quite a big impact I hadn't realized before. And as a consequence of doing a debate on that summit and the progress that had been made on nutrition, I met up with a number of organizations, including Results UK, and had the opportunity to sort of see firsthand the evidence of the impact of nutrition-sensitive policies could have. And that involved a visit to both Zambia and Kenya. And it was incredible, really. And I suppose my background in civil society, what made these policies sustainable for me was how they were embedded within local civil society. So relatively small changes at relatively low cost had quite high impact. And that's what impressed me most. And that's what made me determined to be a strong advocate for nutrition, and certainly a strong advocate for a successful Nutrition for Growth Summit in Tokyo.
You then decided to become a co-chair of the APPG on Nutrition for Growth when it was set up. What kind of activities and discussions have you been involved in as part of the APPG in the lead up to the summit?
Well, I think, what we were trying to do, and I think the purpose of the all-party parliamentary group, like a caucus that, they have in the United States, it's a sort of cross-party consensual organization that enables us to initiate debates on a non-partisan basis. And we were very successful in getting the level of awareness about the summit, increasing the level of awareness and ensuring that the government responded to the sort of arguments we were making. And we had a very positive response from the government initially. And we were very keen to ensure that we actually expanded our work, not only just within Parliament as parliamentarians, but my co-chair, a Conservative MP, we tried to ensure that we met with others to be strong advocates. And I come back to the point about some of the civil society engagement we had, and looking at also other policymakers, including the World Bank, where we had successful meetings in terms of advocating stronger interventions on nutrition, because the costs of malnutrition are huge. And obviously the headline figures about the number of child deaths, particularly 45% of under 5 child deaths are as a cause of malnutrition. But we also looked at the other impacts, like, the impact on the economy, the impact on education, the impact on low-income countries growing. And that's another thing that sort of motivated us. So the parliamentary group sort of didn't restrict its activities to simply debates in Parliament, which we were very successful in doing. But we did meet and try to meet with other parliamentarians across the globe. And recently, we had a very successful meeting with the Hunger caucus of the US Congress, and Congressman Jim McGovern, who chairs that caucus. We had several meetings with him, and we got together both as an APPG and his caucus in raising the need for a positive response to the summit with both President Biden and Prime Minister Johnson. So we made a collective approach to those leaders who, the US and the UK had been leading countries at the original summit, and we wanted to ensure that leadership role was maintained. So good collective working there.
Following on from that, what do you see as the role of parliamentarians around the world in improving nutrition?
Well, I think there are many layers to it. And I think being strong advocates in terms of maintaining policy is very important. But also, as I was saying, in terms of how not only are we being strong advocates with governments in their ability to, from the donor countries in particular, to continue support for such work, but policymakers across, I mentioned the World Bank, but also being involved with scaling up nutrition programs, particularly in Africa, where actually the programs not just sort of advocating food supplements and all those things, it's a holistic approach to local governments to make them more sustainable. And that includes ensuring that we have civil society advocates within all countries. I mean, the most important thing about the SDGs is that they are universal in nature. All countries have a duty to aim to deliver on that 2030 agenda. So I was impressed that, a lot of the UK programs were not just about funding particular specific interventions in terms of nutritional supplements, but also they involved education, they involved support for civil society, they involved actually building strong advocates in those countries so that all governments will be having to respond to those sorts of demands. And I was impressed that, particularly on the scaling up nutrition programs, that local politicians and local community leaders were responding to that sort of civil society organisation. Vitally important, in my opinion.
And I remember when we went on a trip to Zambia together, having the opportunity to talk to ministers and people in country to raise those issues, and they'd be able to link that up with the people we were meeting, just the difference it can make. Yeah, just asking those questions. Yeah.
And often I think what we forget is that, you can talk to politicians, particularly in capitals, and they will talk about their policies and their interventions. But when you're talking about holistic programs that require actually sometimes a change in the way people organize their lives and the change in the way that they approach things, in those circumstances, actually the greatest impact is when you get local community leaders becoming strong advocates for those sorts of nutritional programs. And I think one of the visits we made, Lucy, was to a school where not only were we receiving information from school children, but we were also hearing from them about how they influenced their parents, about how diet had changed, and also how local agricultural products had changed as a consequence of positive intervention on nutrition programs. So it's not just politicians, as I say, I keep stressing this point, it's about how we reach out to local community leaders and local communities.
If we bring it back to the summit, what are you hoping that the summit will achieve?
Well, I think one of the difficulties that we faced over the last 18 months has been how, well, one, of course, the summit had to be postponed because of COVID. And COVID, of course, has had a huge impact in terms of not only obviously the ability to organise, but it's also having a big impact on economies, particularly in Africa, and also the donor countries having to respond to the impact on their economies. And that has had a big impact, particularly in the UK, on the level of overseas development assistance available. And what I have tried to stress in our approach to President Biden and to Prime Minister Johnson is to sort of, in terms of building back after COVID, these nutrition programs are the building block, essential if we're to ensure that we return to that positive agenda for 2030. And that's why the UK's leadership is absolutely vital to try, and the US leadership. But both countries have got a responsibility that to lead and to encourage and to set an example. And I'm hoping that we will maintain the level of support over from the summit that we were able to sort of launch from the 2013 summit. That's my hope.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me, Ray. It's been really interesting, and I think Fred's raised some really key issues. So thank you.
Pleasure. I hope the summit is a success.
Thank you, Lord Collins and Ms. Drescher. I think you really speak with vision about the universality of the SDGs and how it would take the whole community of local politicians and community leaders alongside national governments showing strong leadership on the international stage to deliver on those goals. Now, I am glad to introduce a conversation with leaders from Burkina Faso. Judith Cabaret is head of advocacy for Action Against Hunger's regional office in West and Central Africa and Sun Civil Society Network regional coordinator. The Honorable Dissa Nomu is member of the Parliament of Burkina Faso, member of the Parliament of ECOWAS, and chair of the MP's Network for Food Security and Nutrition in West and Central Africa.
Bonjour honorable, merci vraiment pour votre disponibilité pour participer à ce webinaire qui met l'accent sur le rôle des parlementaires en matière de promotion de la nutrition. Honorable Nomu Dissa, on aimerait bien savoir qu'est-ce qui vous a motivé à vous positionner en tant que champion pour la promotion de la nutrition.
Merci beaucoup, Judith, pour cette opportunité que vous nous offrez pour encore nous exprimer au nom des parlementaires. Je puis vous rassurer que mon engagement pour cette activité ou pour l'action pour la nutrition, au-delà de l'agenda politique que je détiens, est un engagement personnel. Je me suis engagé pour que l'agenda de la nutrition connaisse vraiment une progression assez importante, que ce soit au Burkina, dans la sous-région ou en Afrique et dans le monde entier. Je me suis engagé de façon personnelle pour que cet agenda puisse connaître des objectifs nobles.
Merci beaucoup. Et la motivation de base, elle vient aussi de votre profil en tant qu'ancien nutritionniste.
Oui, naturellement, je ne dirais même pas ancien nutritionniste, je suis toujours nutritionniste, même si je porte un costume de parlementaire, mais je garde ma profession de base, et ce qui fait que mes motivations sont encore plus pointues, parce qu'il faut que nous poussons l'agenda de la nutrition afin que le monde politique aussi puisse accompagner cet agenda qui va faire de la nutrition, en tout cas les préoccupations mondiales, les préoccupations nationales et les préoccupations locales.
OK. Honorable Nomu, dites-moi comment les parlementaires au niveau du Burkina arrivent à fixer les priorités au niveau politique, mais aussi sur les questions de financement en matière de nutrition.
Merci beaucoup pour cette question très pertinente. D'abord, il faut reconnaître que les parlementaires au niveau du Burkina sont organisés en réseau. Avec l'appui des partenaires techniques et financiers et la société civile, nous avons mis en place ce que nous avons appelé le réseau des parlementaires pour la sécurité nutritionnelle au Parlement du Burkina. Et ce réseau vient s'appuyer sur le rôle régalien des députés, qui est donc de voter la loi, de consentir l'impôt et de contrôler l'action du gouvernement. Ce troisième rôle régalien des parlementaires fait que nous avons beaucoup d'influence sur les décisions politiques et le financement de la nutrition. Alors, premièrement, lorsqu'il s'agit donc d'influencer les politiques publiques en matière de nutrition, nous avons 3 actions essentielles, c'est-à-dire les questions orales au gouvernement pour leur demander comment ils gèrent les projets et programmes de nutrition. Deuxième action, c'est les missions d'information qui sont autorisées par le président de l'Assemblée pour permettre d'aller sur un sujet pointu, comprendre avec le gouvernement qu'est-ce qui est fait pour tel ou tel sujet, tel ou tel programme de nutrition. Et donc, la troisième action, qui est donc celle qui permet parfois donc de régler des problèmes qui sont structurels, c'est des enquêtes parlementaires sur les questions de nutrition et aussi permettre au gouvernement de rendre des comptes. Deuxièmement, sur ce qui est du financement de la nutrition, vous savez que les parlementaires votent la loi, y compris la loi emblématique qui est la loi des finances. Mais avant le vote de la loi, les parlementaires ont l'occasion de faire ce qu'on appelle le débat d'orientation budgétaire pour orienter les investissements du gouvernement en matière de politique publique. Voilà encore un autre point où les parlementaires du réseau utilisent ce débat d'orientation parlementaire pour influencer l'orientation des finances dans un secteur ou dans un autre. Et du coup, comme nous, on est réunis en réseau, notre préoccupation, c'est le financement pour la nutrition. Et enfin, nous avons le vote de la loi proprement dite. Lors du vote de la loi, les parlementaires peuvent donc poser leur veto pour dire, bon, nous voulons ceci ou cela de la nutrition. Ce qui m'amène à donner des exemples concrets au niveau du Burkina. Vous savez avec moi qu'en 2017-2018, nous avons fait le plaidoyer où la nutrition a bénéficié d'un financement assez conséquent. D'abord par la création d'une ligne budgétaire au niveau du ministère de la Santé spécifique à la nutrition. Cette ligne a été approvisionnée pendant longtemps pour permettre à la nutrition donc, de revenir au premier plan au niveau du ministère. Avec la situation sécuritaire, il y a eu quelques désagréments, mais on se dit que c'est des choses qui vont reprendre du moment où ça est là et ça a besoin d'être activé. Et n'oubliez pas que les parlementaires organisés dans ce réseau ont accompagné donc beaucoup de partenaires et la société civile pour que enfin le président du Faso lui-même soit désigné comme champion de la nutrition et il s'est engagé fortement avec des projets et programmes assez conséquents pour la nutrition. Au point qu'en 2020, ou disons fin 2020, début 2021, alors le président du Faso a pris un décret portant donc création du Conseil national pour la nutrition que lui-même il préside. C'est quand même quelque chose d'assez important qu'il faut mentionner. C'est comme si la nutrition était sur la plus haute marche de la nation burkinabé. Et voilà quelques exemples que je peux donner pour montrer à quel point les parlementaires burkinabés influencent les décisions en faveur de la nutrition et influencent les finances pour la nutrition.
Merci bien, honorable, pour ces différents exemples qui ont été portés. On note avec beaucoup d'intérêt l'engagement de haut niveau du chef de l'État burkinabé et j'aimerais bien revenir là-dessus pour voir en fait comment, de façon un peu plus pratique, vous arrivez, vous, à vous coordonner entre députés pour pouvoir influencer grandement cet engagement de haut niveau et faire en sorte vraiment que la partie, on va dire, gouvernementale puisse respecter ses promesses et ses engagements.
Vous savez avec moi que organisé dans un réseau, nous menons des activités avec l'appui des partenaires naturellement et nous avons eu des séances de formation, de sensibilisation des parlementaires sur la nutrition pour les outils. On ne peut pas dire à quelqu'un de faire un plaidoyer alors que la personne n'a pas les outils nécessaires. Donc, l'une des actions préalables, c'était donc de renforcer les capacités des députés afin qu'ils puissent avoir des informations, des rudiments sur le secteur de la nutrition. Et c'est en ayant donc cette formation que les députés se sont engagés volontairement à ce qu'on puisse aller vers le plaidoyer pour, en tout cas, une nutrition beaucoup plus regardée par le politique. Et je disais tantôt dans mon intervention qu'il y a des questions orales au gouvernement, des missions d'information et ainsi de suite. Et les débats continuent dans le Parlement sur les questions de nutrition et sécurité alimentaire.
Merci beaucoup, honorable. Alors, la dernière question pour nous, ça sera vraiment de voir comment de façon pratique vous arrivez à vous organiser pour travailler pour l'influence. Comme vous le savez, vous avez tantôt parlé des plans de nutrition, mais aussi des investissements en matière de nutrition. Comment vous arrivez à vous organiser en équipe pour embarquer les autres parlementaires avec vous pour ce travail d'influence?
Merci beaucoup, Judy. C'est une question très pertinente. Vous vous souviendrez que nous avons eu une réunion régionale à Ouagadougou en 2017 qui a regroupé les parlementaires non seulement de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, mais aussi de l'Afrique du Centre pour que nous ayons un grand réseau qui permet de partager non seulement les expériences nationales, mais aussi de partager les expériences au niveau régional qui ont réussi. Et en 2019, nous avons encore eu une deuxième réunion à Abidjan pour faire le bilan des actions menées de 2017 à 2019 et nous sommes sortis encore avec un nouveau plan consolidé où les parlementaires ont pris des engagements tels que l'élaboration des lois sur la commercialisation du substitut de lait maternel, ainsi de suite. Il y a eu beaucoup d'engagements des partenaires que nous sommes en train de suivre. Mais nous sommes organisés dans un groupe WhatsApp où chaque fois qu'il y a une information, nous y partageons. Et chaque fois qu'il y a des évolutions en matière de nutrition, nous y allons pour partager les informations. Je vous donne la dernière information, c'est l'adoption d'une loi sur le droit à l'alimentation ce qui s'est passé au Niger. Nous avons partagé dans notre groupe WhatsApp, c'était une expérience réussie. Le Parlement a voté cette loi. Et je peux vous rassurer que c'est comme ça que nous essayons de travailler, non seulement à travers des renforcements de capacités, mais aussi le partage de l'expérience pour influencer au niveau de nos gouvernements nationaux tout ce qui est politique publique en faveur de la nutrition.
Merci beaucoup, honorable Dissane Yomo.
C'est moi qui vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Ms. Caboret and Mr. Nomu, for illustrating by example how you have been able to successfully champion nutrition in your country. Next, I am delighted to invite the Honorable Nima Lugangira, Member of Parliament of Tanzania, to provide closing remarks. The Honorable Mrs. Lugangira is a champion for food systems and chairs the Parliamentary Caucus on Food Safety. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and I'm very humbled to have this great opportunity of providing the closing remarks. I wish to sincerely convey my gratitude to Results UK, Bread for the World, 1000 Days, and other organizers, and particularly the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Nutrition, for having bestowed on me this confidence, the confidence on me to provide the closing remarks. And I've learned a lot from my colleagues, parliamentarians from different parts of the world. And I wish to start by sincerely applauding the efforts of this meeting in ensuring that we bring parliamentarians to the table. Because oftentimes such meetings take place and you find that parliamentarians are not there or not in the number in which they should be. Decisions are made. And then when it comes to implementations in the countries, parliamentarians are then expected to take on the role and the responsibility of following through those implementations of decisions that were made when we were not at the table. So bringing us to the table in this important discussion, discussing the role of parliamentarians, it makes it so much more stronger. And actually, it's placing us the accountability, because we cannot turn around and say, you know what, we weren't involved, because we were involved. So I highly commend this, and I would like to call upon other events such as this one and the ones that will carry on coming, in the future. We should always strive to ensure that we have parliamentarians at the table from different parts of the world. Now, let me talk a little bit about Africa. As all of you know, Africa is faced with a huge burden of malnutrition. But at the same time, Africa is faced with a huge burden of food loss, food waste. And at the same time, we're one of the big, we spend a lot of our foreign index on food imports. So when you look at all of these, we have high malnutrition, high food waste, but we're also we're spending a lot of money on food importation. While we have arable land, much of the land which is very fertile, untapped. So clearly it shows that our food systems are failing us. So there is a need to review our food systems. There is a need to look at our nutrition interventions and ensure that these nutrition interventions are fit for the African context. But also, something that recently most African countries have come to realize is when you're pushing for food security, it does not guarantee that you have nutrition security. Because when you're talking about food security, you're more focused on the staple foods. And we all know that staple foods are not high in nutrition. They don't have the highest nutrient values. So there has been a shift of making sure that while we're pushing for food security, we also focus on nutrition security, which is something which I believe as parliamentarians, we have a role to ensure that much as we're pushing for food security, we need to also at the same time look at nutrition security. And while still on the issue of food systems, we have a huge challenge of access to inputs. COVID-19 was a big example. For example, in Tanzania, we didn't go on lockdown during the COVID pandemic when it was at the height of it. But we suffered the consequences of COVID-19, especially in delay of receiving agricultural inputs, because the countries that we're importing from had lockdowns. Airlines were not, the movement of goods was not happening as it was. So it showed the fragility of our, food systems in totality. And it's really, and the way in which it hit us is because if we don't get those inputs, we don't have other alternatives. The other important factor on our food systems is ensuring that we can preserve, our local seeds, indigenous seeds, and the foods, such that we maintain the ability to persevere climate change issues, but also get the nutrients that are needed at a lower cost. And finally, on the issue there, on terms of food systems, is we have a challenge, obviously, of transportation. Most of the food loss happens during transportation, and this is something which we can continue discussing globally together what can be done. Now, we've just come from the COP26, but as a parliamentarian, I'm of the opinion that going forward, and particularly in the next COP27 and in the implementation of the COP26 commitments, it's time that we bring together climate change and agriculture. Oftentimes, when people are addressing climate change, they focus on environmental side of things. But agriculture is, contributes to climate change, but it's also hit hardest as a result of climate change. We have issues of, food low productivity in farming, poor soil health. As a result, poor nutrition, and it will make our efforts towards ending malnutrition even harder. So I think as parliamentarians, we need to come together and make sure that climate change discussions go hand in hand with agricultural interventions. I'll touch on a little bit on the households. I'm very pleased from all the parliamentarians that spoke. They touched on the importance of 1,000 days and other groups. But I wish to to also emphasize the importance of adolescent nutrition, because adolescent nutrition, especially for adolescent girls, that is where the vicious circle starts, and it becomes a never-ending cycle, particularly when adolescent girls start to get their menstrual cycle, and they're not getting enough vitamins and minerals to replenish the blood loss every month, and then that's why in most African countries we have a high anemia rate, which then trickles down when you become pregnant. You have a higher chance of having a malnourished baby, anemia, etc., etc. So it's very important to also look at that group. But much as we're starting with 1,000 days, the beginning of the life cycle, we must also remember towards the end, elderly nutrition. Elderly nutrition is often forgotten, but it's also critical. And as they say, all of us here are elders of tomorrow. So we need to prepare. We need to prepare that. We need to prepare an inclusive environment such that when we fall into that group, we're also not going to end up being malnourished. Now, I'll touch on a little bit about Tanzania in terms of our national interventions. We have recently launched the National Multi-Sector Nutrition Action Plan, which involves over 10 ministries. Because as you know, nutrition cannot be driven just by the health sector. It has to be driven by all sectors, multi-sector. So it's different ministries coming together. Also something that I was also I played an instrumental role in is getting the agriculture ministry to buy in and commit on nutrition, because oftentimes nutrition is driven as if it's a health sector issue. But actually we cannot solve nutrition without agriculture. So it's important to emphasize on the nutrition sensitive agriculture. And recently our Ministry of Agriculture launched a nutrition sensitive agriculture plan. On my personal interventions, I founded an NGO called Agri-Thamani, in which we're trying to add value on nutrition interventions here in Tanzania, and we particularly work in schools. So through our work, we came to realize that in our schools, it's not common to have school feeding, especially in public schools. So around the schools, you have so many little street food vendors, and the food that they produce is not entirely nutritious or safe. But on the other hand, even when schools, supply food, the safety. So recently, I think it was just last month, the government of Tanzania, through the Ministry of Education, launched the school feeding guidelines. So we're making progress on that front. But just very quickly, I was very pleased to hear about the importance of bipartisan initiatives. And last year in 2020, we had general elections here in Tanzania. And through Agri-Thamani, I championed an initiative that was aimed at making sure nutrition becomes prioritized by political parties. And in that space, we had 3 political parties, the ruling party and 2 main opposition parties that bought in the idea. And right now, if you look at the if you look at their election manifestos, nutrition has been prioritized in the manifestos, and they've made commitments. So what has that resulted in? It's now resulted in, when you go at community level, the local leaders at community level, despite, irrespective of what political party or what political affiliations they have, they're joined by the agenda of nutrition, because if each of them look at the election manifestos, they'll find nutrition. And finally, it's very important to work also with religious leaders, because they're very influential. And when we're talking about nutrition, we have proven here in Tanzania, it's not about that we don't have food. We have the food, but we just don't know what to eat. So involving these influential groups, religious leaders, politicians, media, etc., is very important. But now, when we're talking about this impact of nutrition, we can't exclude the youth. And oftentimes youth don't have access to meet parliamentarians. So an initiative that I've started here in Tanzania is to start up youth nutrition dialogues with parliamentarians. And we're hoping to be able to scale this up, starting with the East African community and then the SADC community. And hopefully we'll be able to partner with some of your organizations into sort of structurally, make it more structured and have more tangible milestones, etc. But we've seen the value of bringing youth to the table and involving youth, because they'll be the ones who will carry forward this torch. Now, the best part, my call to action. I was very excited when I got the opportunity, and I knew that this meeting we're going to be addressing, also the US CEO Council for Nutrition. And I thought to myself, Africa is a huge market for most US multinationals. So obviously, almost all CEOs are eyeing Africa as a market, But at the same time, especially the food-related multinationals, agriculture-related multinationals. But at the same time, I would like to challenge, the US CEOs, and my call to action to them is, can they commit, a percentage of their profits that is generated from Africa to be put back to the community through tangible community nutrition interventions? I'll give a quick example. We have activities whereby we are establishing school vegetable gardens. We would like to establish school biofortified crop farms, but then to do that you need seeds. Can we get US CEOs chip into that. Planting of fruit trees, making sure that schools have got safe cooking areas like kitchenettes, doing community nutrition days to enhance to provide the knowledge, doing capacity building on nutrition of these community leaders. These are such things that I myself as a parliamentarian, I would very much welcome, welcome US CEOs and welcome the opportunity of US CEOs actually, kind of putting the money where their mouth is and coming to Africa, supporting such interventions. And I think it's the right thing to do. It's a corporate social responsibility that also goes hand in hand with making efforts towards ending malnutrition. And to conclude, I wish to sincerely thank Madam Gerda, the coordinator of SUN, of the Scaling Up Nutrition Movement, because when I had my first idea of, bringing the agenda of nutrition to politicians and getting it in election manifestos, she was very supportive and actually introduced me to different UN organizations, which led to the success of actually having nutrition in the election manifestos. But once again, thank you so much for this opportunity, and I look forward to collaborating with all of you and on different initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Mrs. Lugangira. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your voice. Having visited Tanzania several times, this country has a very special place in my heart. I have the task now to try to summarize today's event. If there was one word, I would probably say, wow. There's been so much important content, information, vision, and leadership. We've heard from leaders and civil society from several countries, all deeply committed to advancing nutrition in their countries and around the world. We need parliamentarians. We need parliamentarians to be persistent voices to administrations and legislators who create laws that complement national policy. And we need civil society to support parliamentarians, including coalitions such as the SUN Civil Society Network, ICANN, and the CEO Council for Nutrition, who cultivate and support champions as well as community leaders, grassroots activists, and other constituent advocates who help make nutrition a political priority for the elected officials. Friends, this is what political will looks like. It's practical, yes. We talk about budgets and national plans and appropriations. It is practical, but that does not take away from the powerful vision. This vision, one of a world where children go to bed each night, where mothers receive adequate nutrition, as I shared, where children are growing up, where families are able not just to survive, but thrive, is one we can build together. Thank you genuinely for your time today. We will email everyone the event recording and answer as many of the questions you raised in the chat that we can. Please feel free to reach out to me or any of the co-hosting organizations if you would like to do more to educate and encourage your legislators and members of parliament to take action on global nutrition. We're also here to learn, so feel free to share resources with us that we might share with our participants. I hope you will leave today's event inspired to do what you can in your corner of the world, of your nation, of your community to advance nutrition. I thought it might be appropriate as we close now with a proverb from East Africa, likely from Tanzania, that has been very impactful for me and perhaps for others as well. And this proverb goes like this: if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. Friends, if we want to go far, and if we want to go deep, we have to go together. Thank you so much again for joining us. Blessings to you.